Welcome back to the True North Truck Thought Podcast. The trucking industry keeps talking about public perception, and for good reason. How we're viewed doesn't just affect reputation, it affects recruiting, regulatory posture, courtroom outcomes, and ultimately how the public responds to trucking policy and safety issues. The challenge is that while millions of loads move safely every day, the stories that shape perceptions are usually the negative ones. The crashes, the lawsuits, the headlines. Not the professionalism that actually defines much of the industry. So today we're digging into that question. What is the public perception of trucking right now? And how can the industry realistically change it? Joining us for this conversation is friend and colleague Joshua Vance, VP of Safety and Compliance from J.B. Hunt. So, let's get started. Okay, well, welcome. Joshua Vance is here from J.B. Hunt. Really appreciate you being here. John Biblis, J.B. the Great, here again as always. Steve, thanks for coming for our podcast today. Looking forward to talking about an issue that I think us as sort of longtime industry vets have talked about a lot over the years. What is the public perception of trucking, right? And how has that improved or gone the other way? And, I think one of the questions is, well, why do we keep asking this question? Why is public perception important? And I think, in thinking about this, I think there's a lot of reasons why it's pretty important. First of all, public perception impacts our ability to recruit talent to the industry, right? So if people don't think that we're important or that we're a good industry to work for, they're not going to look our direction when it's time to find a career, right? The second, of course, is scrutiny from law enforcement, right? If the perception of the industry is not strong and they don't think we're safe, they don't think we're compliant, we're going to see more scrutiny, right? It's that perception of tired drivers that drives hours of service requirements, right? Of course, there's the courtroom. I'm sure, Joshua, that you've experienced this. What's the public perception of trucking in the courtroom, and how does that impact our outcomes? There's driver regulatory pressure as well as public tolerance, right? How tolerant is the public going to be as far as when they make public policy like truck lane restrictions and environmental regulations, right? And so I think all of this is sort of tangentially related to today's topic, which is, of course, industry perception. So maybe we should start by sort of setting the guardrails here. What do we think is the public perception of trucking? What do other people think of trucking, and what do we think the public perception should be? What do we think the trucking industry stands for? So, Josh, maybe you can start there.
Yeah, I think that it's really a mixed bag right now. I think that if you ask the general person on the street what they thought of trucking, they're probably going to think, well, that's the big thing that's in my way when I'm trying to get where I'm trying to go. They don't go fast enough. They don't get out of my way. And obviously the message that we're trying to convey is we're the ones delivering your groceries. We're the ones delivering all of the things that you want to buy when you go to a big box store or to a grocery store or to any store. And that has been tough over the years. And we've got a lot of noise right now with all of this chameleon carrier stuff. I've read probably 30 minutes worth of articles and watched a 45-minute expose on what's going on in the industry. My fear is people don't recognize there's a difference between the big, safe fleets, the small, safe fleets, and these folks that shouldn't be on the road. We all get lumped in together, and I understand it, being able to look above and see it, but that's the frustration for me and my friends in some of the bigger carriers. We are trying to do things the right way. We are doing things the right way. We're holding ourselves accountable, and that's really hard to tell an average person standing on the street.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, Joshua, because when you think about when our industry shows up in the news, right, it's usually there's this bad crash or there's someone supply shortages, there's compliance problems, right? We rarely hear about the good news stories. And you think that's, and as the industry, right, you're just trying to do the business, right? You're running the business, you've got stuff and oftentimes you don't have the luxury of thinking about those things, of saying, of dealing with that. And when you look at kind of other sectors of the economy, a lot of times when those bad news stories, they have an entire marketing team that pounces on that, right? And said, no, you're wrong, and here's why. Do you think that that hurts us of not trying to address those things head on? Because you're right, there's so many more good news stories, but the bad ones are the ones that kind of stick in people's minds. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it absolutely hurts us. It's human nature. You're going to remember the salacious, crazy thing. You're not going to remember that you just saw XYZ truck at the back of Walmart delivering your bread. And, I don't want to get too off in the weeds on how media works today, but those big stories, that clickbait is what makes money. And if you tell a puff piece on how XYZ carrier is doing a great job and they're hiring the right people, like that's unfortunately boring. And so nobody's gonna pay attention to that. So it really puts us at a disadvantage.
You had mentioned, Josh, the focus on the essentiality of the industry, which has been a huge focus of the industry over the last 20 years. Like, we are essential. And I was just looking at some data from the last Trucking Moves America Forward survey that said that we're kind of nailing that argument. Like, people are agreeing, especially after COVID. We got a huge COVID bump from all our highway heroes that were delivering all of the things that we needed because we were stuck in our homes. And that was really effective. But they don't love the industry because they have to drive near big trucks, and sometimes that's a scary thing. It's almost like, people seem to hate the player, not the game, so to speak, right? Like, they get why the game is important. So how do we have structural challenges. Like, we drive big trucks. You drive the nation's containers around the country, which are big and scary too. Like, how do we combat that, right? I mean, it's kind of ironic because you were like, they're frustrated because we're driving too slow. But like, we are driving slow to be safe and improve our industry. So how do we get past that paradigm or that conflict?
It really is a catch-22. And to your point, we need to be driving a little bit slower because the truck can only do what the truck can do. Cars are almost race cars at this point. You get a nice luxury vehicle, that thing can get 0 to 60 in 4 seconds and stop on a dime. Tractor just can't do that, especially if we're fully loaded. And so, yeah, we do have to drive slower, and that does upset people. And the pie in the sky solution is more roads. You have roads that are for trucks only and roads that are for cars only, but that's not feasible. That's not reasonable. And so sometimes I feel like we're at an impasse and I don't know what the answer is. I saw an article or a news story that was done. I believe it was an ABC affiliate, and they had come on with, I don't know if it was the state that they were operating in or what, but they were talking about the no-go zones. And I remember 25 years ago, there were certain companies that had those logos on the sides and the back of their trailers and saying, if you can't see the driver's mirrors, they can't see you, don't stay there. And if we had some more of those types of campaigns to really educate the public, I think it would help. Another thing that's very unpopular, but I think could help us, is if John Q. Public had to renew their license and they had to have some sort of continuing education to be able to get it. Whether that's every 10 years or 20 years or 5 years, I don't know the answer. But I think it's very interesting that in the United States, you can get a driver's license when you turn 16 years old. And as long as you remember to say, hey, I need a new one, you're good to go.
Yeah, I think.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, I was going to say, I think you're hitting on something that Sean and I talk about often about education. And I think if you look at, for example, you look at a state CDL manual, right? Or even a driver's license manual for, driver's ed programs. And You look at there's rarely any information in there relating to trucks, right? For the average individual that's going through and taking a driving test or driver's ed. And so they don't get the opportunity to be educated about trucks, why they're different, and why they're important. And I think that's a big hole. And I think you're on the licensing side. You're right. There's a perception that it's more of a right versus a privilege. I think that lends itself to some of these gaps we're talking about, and maybe from your perspective, what do you think like the average person gets wrong about our industry? What are your thoughts there? Like, what do you think that we could, if there's one or a couple things that we could tell John Q. Public about the industry that help them appreciate us more? What do you think that could be?
The perception that I generally get when we look at runaway verdicts or nuclear, if that's what you want to call them, is
thermonuclear. I like to call them that too
oh,
sometimes.
great. Haven't heard that one. Is that we're all in it for the money. That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to make money. We're trying to save money, and we don't care about anybody else. And I don't understand where that came from. If you think about any other business that operates on the roadway, and these are as vital as trucking, plumbers, electricians, folks that are coming out to repair your home. I don't hear that perception of those folks that we're also sharing the roadways with. And it seems to come down to the size of the vehicle. I think a full-size truck with a 53-foot trailer or a 45 or a 40 feels big, it feels intimidating, it feels scary. And so there has become a perception that scary thing is doing something wrong. That thing that they're doing wrong must be around money. And so we've got to make them pay for doing things wrong. And I really wish we could change that perception.
No, it's an interesting point because a lot of those electricians and plumbers and landscapers, a lot of those are trucking companies too, right?
And I'm telling you, their compliance is not near as strong as yours is, Joshua.
Correct. I remember the first time I went to Oklahoma City for a DOT class, and we had tree trimmers and we had golf cart haulers, like, gooseneck type trailers. They had no idea what was going on in that class. Yeah. And I'm like teaching people on the side, like, this is what we do. I got you. I can help you with this.
Yeah. So I think this whole conversation is going to reveal a whole bunch of these catch-22s. But here's another one. You just talked about sort of the courtroom challenge and this perception that we're all about money, right? And even 15 years ago, all the trucking companies were saying safety is my top priority. Number one, that this is the thing I think about every day. And now what have our lawyers told us to say? Not that.
It's a priority.
A priority among many others, right? And so, how do we, if we're not allowed to tout that safety is everything because we might make a mistake because one of our drivers could make a mistake in the future, then how can we talk about our industry, about safety beyond essentiality and make an impact on public perception? How are we going to even do that?
It's right there in the Miranda rights, right? Everything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law.
Yikes.
And so that is one of those things. And I don't know. I feel like some sort of tort reform is an answer. And we've been learning here recently that there's another industry that is able to protect some of their safety data because they're quote unquote going above and beyond, and that can't be held against them. And so if we can somehow get that concept transferred into road transportation, then I think we can do a better job of bragging about the things that we're doing. We're constantly searching for what's the next thing that can help our drivers have visibility and have time to make decisions. And how do we push our OEM or our truck manufacturers? How do we push them to give us a safer vehicle that doesn't cost 1,000 times more than the standard truck? And so that's one of the things that we're doing, and not just at JB Hunt, but we've got a group of folks who are trying to work with the manufacturers and say, we want the safest truck possible. We want a truck that virtually cannot have a collision. And they're not there yet. And so it comes back to what can we add onto the truck and how can we train our drivers better.
So
I'm a huge.
And then hopefully you can brag about it. Then hopefully you can be like, we just bought the safest trucks. And then even if it does crash, or somebody crashes into us, which is more than likely,
For sure.
then that doesn't get held against us,
Well, that's one thing I want Steve to jump in, but I'm afraid I'll forget, Sean. I mean, NHTSA will tell us that 70% of the crashes between a personal operated vehicle and a tractor trailer is caused by the operator of the personal vehicle. But I only know that because I'm in the industry. The average person is going to tell you it's always the trucker's fault. But the numbers bear out that 70% of the time, way more than a coin flip, it's not the trucker's fault.
Well, because everybody's a great driver. I mean, that's the thing. Like, everybody's a great driver, despite the fact that they've not been trained nearly as well as the rest of them. And just a quick story, we're talking about newly licensed. So my daughter is preparing to get her driver's license, and I put something on LinkedIn last week just about that, because she's gonna have to deal with my protocol, right? Like, she's gonna get trained by me, she's gonna have to pass my test. And so I asked LinkedIn, hey, I'm writing a test for my daughter. What do you guys think? And I tell you what, I'm still responding to comments. It was a fire hose of enthusiasm from the trucking industry about training, not just truck drivers, but all the drivers to be great, safe drivers. And I hate to keep going back to this, but it is frustrating. It must be frustrating to not be able to scream that loud and clear. Like, this is what I wake up for every day. Because we're not allowed to make a mistake. We're not allowed to be human, despite the fact that all the awesome four-wheelers out there can make mistakes 70% of the time.
Now, Josh, you hit on something that I think is a burr in our craw too, right? We just oftentimes we're not focused on kind of as part of that messaging, really, what's the root cause of the problems. And even when you talk to the government folks, right, they oftentimes won't necessarily point where those problems are occurring, so that hampers our ability to be part of that message. But I did want to lean in a little bit. You talked about, to the OEMs, the latest and greatest stuff on the trucks, but with the advent of technology and dash cams, and we've got a lot more data and information, and you're seeing more and more even dash cam videos published on social media in autonomous vehicles. Do you think that is helping or hurting our cause from a perception standpoint? How do we harness that to the good, right? Because that can magnify our message if we're doing it in the right way. What are your thoughts there?
So I know that without a doubt it can help our message, but if we go back to the first part of our conversation, that one video that's bad becomes salacious and incendiary, and the 99 videos that are good are boring. And somebody's like, all right, nothing's happening here. Let me see the next one. And so it would be great if we could find some way to make that the standard. Look at all these folks that are doing things the right way. I would want, and I tell my family, hey, if you've got a choice between Carrier A and my trucking company, be beside my trucking company. Because we've got inward-facing cameras. We're doing what we can to make sure our guys are paying attention. I don't know what the other folks are doing. And we've gotten to the point where we need to find a way to use those boring, everyday scenarios to say, this is the normal thing. The salacious thing, that's the one-off that gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at... I'm sorry, go ahead, JB.
Go ahead, JB.
Well, I was just going to say, Joshua, I think you hit it, that, we've got so much good news, but good news isn't really news, right? We've talked about that throughout this conversation. And the other problem is that from 9 a.m. to probably 7 p.m., the public is barraged all day long on TV with how bad trucks are, I mean, you can't turn a TV on and look at a commercial without hearing how bad trucks are from the plaintiff's bar. And I don't know what the answer is on like you said earlier, publicizing our good news, the things we are doing good. But to me, some sort of national campaign, but we're all independent businesses, that don't necessarily advertise. So I don't know if there's an answer
Well,
there.
I think JB, you really talk about something, Joshua. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think JB, you're onto something there. I think if you look at all the associations in our business, right, that's something I think everyone can agree on, that we need to prop up the image of the industry and the driver, and let's work across organizations and come up with a consolidated campaign. Because if I think I look at what the AV companies are starting to do to deal with this, right? They are touting the millions of miles of accident-free driving that they are doing, and they're doing it all the time, not just when there's a bad news story, right? They're saying, look, yeah, and they're being held to a higher standard. So I think it's that kind of stuff that I think becomes part of that consistent message all the time, that we are safe and here's our data to prove it. And that becomes part of every conversation, right? And I think you look at seatbelt campaign, right? It's kind of a constant over the years. We've made leaps and bounds on seatbelt use. And it's because of that constant and consistent message, the same way, all the time, everywhere. And so it helps that behavior change, I think, right? I mean, Joshua, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so just when you said that, I know I'm supposed to wear my seatbelt, and I know I'm not supposed to text and drive, and I know I'm not supposed to drink and drive, because I've got a sign every few miles telling me, lick it or ticket, don't drink and drive. It's not worth it. But I don't see anything that says stay out of a blind spot. Don't follow the truck so close. I would love to see some of that stuff put on those digital boards. The next thing I would say is we've kind of joked about it, and I don't know how much we're really joking and how serious we are at this point, but if we had a billboard next to the billboard lawyers that said, hey, the last time that you sued a trucking company, all you did was pay for this billboard. Because it's the truth. Yeah. That's how they have the money to do that. Yeah. They get these crazy suits. They upset people. They say things that aren't necessarily true, that the courts are set up so it's really hard to refute a hypothetical. And then they make millions of dollars. The majority of that goes to the firm, not to the client. And then they buy another billboard. And so pointing at somebody and saying, hey, don't like the price of your groceries, talk to these two.
Yeah.
And I won't mention their names, but you all know who they are.
Yes. Well, no,
and then the last thing I would say, Steve, you brought up associations. I don't know if I'm supposed to name them, so I won't. But, I was recently at a meeting and I saw an amazing commercial internal that said nothing without trucking. And I'll be honest with you all, I got goosebumps. But I'm not seeing that at 8:00 when I turn on a basketball game. And I would love to see those types of campaigns become national to show the value of what we're doing. Everybody else does commercials. We all know all the risks of taking medication, but we get to see a commercial for that every 30 seconds.
Yeah, right. Well, and interesting to that point, it would be nice because all of the major brands that run those commercials, right, on the Super Bowl, they're all using trucks, right? Wouldn't it be nice if they made a mention and thanked the industry for helping move their products, right? I mean, so getting some of those major brands to help in this campaign, I think would be a huge lift to the industry.
I agree. Well, I've got an idea for a campaign, which is a bad one, I promise you. But we talked about the dash cams, right, and how just one video can go viral and create problems. What if 70% of all the dash cam videos out there 70 to 84%, depending on the statistic that you like, actually showed the passenger vehicle like smashing into the truck. Again, a bad idea, but it drives home a point. I think maybe we'll tact here to sort of its impact on our workforce, the perception. I mean, again, we're in a catch-22 because we've talked about driver shortage for years and years, which has suddenly become controversial, but that's another podcast. But just the presence of a shortage can impact perception of the industry. Well, why can't you get people to join? It must be a terrible job. It must be difficult and unsafe or whatever the case may be. So, aside from general public perception, how do we improve the perception of people we want to work for us? Right? Like, what are the things maybe JB Hunt's doing, or what are the things that the industry should think about to begin attracting those people?
For me, it all comes down to relationship, and we have built our network in such a way that we can touch our drivers. We can see them every morning or every evening when they get ready to start their shift, check in on them. We know their names. We know their families. We know what they're into. Not everybody can do that. I'm not putting down those that can't. But where you can, that is where you change that perception. And it's long been said, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so if you can invest time and attention into your managers and let them know how important that driving fleet is, you can affect real change. But it's hard. There's nothing easy about it at all.
Well, it's
so many. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say it's got to be intentional, right? And so since you're touching your drivers all the time, what are they telling you? How do they feel about their jobs today? Do they feel fulfilled? Do they feel like they're what's your sense of your driver pool, both current and the ones that you're recruiting to come join? What's your sense? What are they telling you?
I think that rightfully so, JB Hunt has a reputation. And so people come here because they know that we're going to take care of them and we're going to do things the right way. The general driving pool knows if you want to drive fast, don't come to JB Hunt because we have governors on our trucks. If you want to do drugs, don't come to JB Hunt because we're doing hair testing and you're not going to get in the front door. If you want a job where we're going to take care of you, we're going to listen to you, and we're going to pay you a fair wage, I got keys sitting here ready for you. Let's get you ready to go. And so when we look at like exit interviews for turnover and things like that, it's way more about, the schedule didn't work for me, or I thought this is something I wanted to do, but I need to be home more. And frankly, guys, it's way more, hey, I had a family change. I got to take care of this person now that I didn't have to take care of before. I can't make this work. It's not pay. It's not equipment. It's not relationship. It's extraneous situations that frankly, we just can't overcome. And it's a hard job. I mean, it's tough to stay between those lines and pay attention to everybody that's driving around you 10 times faster than you are. But if you've got the right mentality and you can do that physically during the day, this is a good place to come. And I think the word is out about that. We had some of our historic lows in turnover last year, and I fully expect that to move forward this year and into the future because we know after 60 plus years what drivers need, and we're able to accommodate that in most circumstances. Not everything. No one can work around everything.
So, Joshua, I would agree with you that the JB Hunt reputation in the industry is pretty good. And but when I got in the industry 30 years ago, it might not have been as good as it was now. And there's some milestones that I can remember watching that I think kind of changed that. I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, focusing on getting drivers home had something to do with it. But I don't know if you can talk a little bit about just the intentionality of getting more sophisticated and becoming more driver centric. Any thoughts on that? What did y'all do to accomplish what you've done, other than a whole lot of hard work?
Well, it has been intentional. And there was a point before I came to JB Hunt where we determined we were going to change the way we hired, and that was going to start with pay. And you've seen the chart that shows the year that we did that and how much better we got from a safety perspective after making that adjustment. And so you can't pay, $1 million a year for a trucking job. That's not how it's going to work. But we are going to evaluate the market. We're going to evaluate the job itself, because we have a lot of different jobs, and we're going to pay a fair wage. And as things change, pay is going to change. And so the thing, so you can't always change pay, right? But the thing that you can change is how you treat an individual. And so I've talked about some of the relationships with managers, but our managers understand that we can't do anything without a driver. An empty truck doesn't deliver freight. Not until we get fully autonomous. And even then, we'll see what really happens.
Mm-hmm.
But today, an empty truck can't deliver freight. And so we have to take care of our people. And what I said before, I'm at the risk of being redundant, knowing your driver's names, not their alpha code or their employee ID, knowing about their family, sending cards to the house. We did a campaign. We do it now every winter, where we send materials home, not through the driver, through the mail. And we say, winter's coming. We want you and your family to understand you need extra water. You need extra food. You need warm clothes. You need to prepare for the worst. And the husbands and wives and kids of our drivers are seeing that material going, oh, wait, maybe I didn't think about that. Oh, wait, we work for a company that cares enough to do that. The other thing that we're really leaning into right now is positive recognition. And we do have inward-facing cameras, and that's scary for some people. But we use that as extra opportunities to tell our drivers, you did a great job. And so we have a program that's set up right now where a driver does something, it's captured on video. We recognize that as fantastic work, and we send them a postcard. And it says, John Biblis, on February 20th at 12:30, we saw you driving down Highway 49 in Northwest Arkansas. You had great following distance. Somebody cut you off. You covered the brake to make sure you didn't rear end them. And we just want to tell you did a great job. And it's signed by tons of management and VPs and folks like that. And then they get some award code points or some bonus points they can spend at their leisure, where we're saying, just thank you for doing what we expected. Thank you for keeping that other person safe from themselves. We appreciate it.
So I want to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago, because I think it's an important point. So that inflection point at JB Hunt, because we talk to so many carriers, and I'm sure JB does too, that they're getting tough. It's a tough road to get senior leadership to buy into this shift, where that it's no longer a cost, it's an investment, right? It's all about, because safety and this type of stuff we're talking about is tough to convince on when you're looking at a P&L, right? So how did that transformation happen? Like, what can you share in that convincing of senior leadership that we need to tact and we don't have a choice, right? How did that happen?
I feel like that was already starting when I got here. I worked in the field for a long time. I've only been here at corporate for the last 8 years, and I've been here almost 24. So the overwhelming majority of my time has not been in the corporate setting. But, we had some events where we realized we've got to make some changes, or we're going to be wishing that we had before now. And our leadership has changed slightly over time, but at its core, we have some of the same people in positions of leadership that we've had for multiple years. And that stability and that understanding and the safety culture that we have at JB Hunt has held firm for a couple of decades. And one of the things that I love to tell our new people is our safety culture is a top-down approach. It's not the people at the ground level trying to hold everything up and figure things out and do it on their own. Our CEO and our chairman of the board have signed our safety policy statement that gets distributed throughout the company and says, we're going to take care of our people and we're going to take care of the people that work around ours. And we mean it, and we're going to hold you accountable to it. And that accountability working its way down is what helps us build that culture up.
I love that. And we could continue to have this conversation. And this is something Steve and I deal with a lot with various carriers who are like, how do we improve? And, you try to make that case. But I want to move back a little bit and talk a little bit about, you mentioned people leave the industry, people leave JB Hunt, particularly because they have a change in circumstance, because trucking is a difficult job, right? And I feel like the old perception of the truck driver was somebody who could handle that tough job, somebody who was, uh, who was tough and committed and was of a certain ilk. There was this community you'd always hear about where one truck is on the side of the road and the other truck driver is going to pull over and help. And so if you join our industry, you join our community, and that's a community to be proud of. Do you think, and maybe first we'll talk about the industry as a whole, and then you could talk about, sort of how JB Hunt drivers see JB Hunt, but do you think we can still own that narrative, or do you think now trucking is like, just a way to pay the rent kind of situation?
No, I think we totally can take that back over. I think that the world has gotten faster and people have gotten busier, and it's really hard to look up and see the needs of somebody else if you're looking down and trying to figure out your own mess. But we still see, not just JB Hunt, we still see drivers coming to the aid of the public day in and day out. I've got enough cameras that are forward facing on my trucks that I capture other people doing good stuff. Some vehicle gets in a crash and they're rolled over on their top. It is more often than not going to be a truck driver that pulls over, runs over, and tries to get that person out of the vehicle. And that's one great thing. We've got some of our customers that do highway heroes or heroes of the road or driver of the year, and they go to other trucking companies and say, hey, submit to me your great stories. And I would love it if those stories were a little bit louder, but man, that's a great start. And we've had drivers who have been nominated and won multiple years for putting themselves in harm's way to help another tractor trailer driver or just a POV operator when they're in a time of need. And slowing down and paying attention is going to help increase that. Getting a few more news stories that are actually feel good and say, look at what this person did to save somebody's lives. That helps build that mindset of, oh, wait, I'm a driver. I need to keep my eye open for a situation where I can help somebody out.
Right. We got to give them an identity.
Yes.
I think we all want identity. We all want purpose. That's why we do what we do. And offering that or taking that narrative back, I think could go a long way in solving some of these challenges. When a driver is proud, when anybody is proud, they tell other people, this is a thing that I did, or this is a thing that I saw happen, and it was great. And I think that word of mouth hopefully can shout down the bad news stories and the other things. So, we'll have to see. I mean, the thing is, there's constantly some new wart that somebody is picking at, that we can't escape. I mean, just look at what's happening now with the whole non-domicile situation and entry-level driver training and ELDs. And it's like, hey, like, don't forget that entry-level driver training was stood up to help create that identity, was stood up to help drive safety, and that in fact it's doing that. We have challenges, right? And everybody's got to clean their own house every once in a while, but it just feels like it's, you stand up and you get knocked down again.
Well, yeah. So to that point, I think, Joshua, with this kind of increased enforcement activity that's going on, to Sean's points, do you think that that's having impact on perception, both in the public space, but even in your recruitment efforts of trying to get new folks to come into the industry? What are you seeing?
Doesn't feel like it's hurting our recruitment efforts, but I think it does continue to degrade the industry perception because, again, those stories get clicks, those stories get extra news time, extra screen time, and if no one's focusing on the positive, then anytime perfect example, and I heard this in a podcast the other day. Perfect example. Every time you hear about a plane crashing, you think plane crash every day. But that's not true because no one would ever take the time to go, yep, American delivered every single person to their destination without delay or crash today. Because everyone would go, well, of course they did. That's the expectation. Is when you miss that expectation of perfection, that's when it all gets blown up. And we all get on planes. Maybe some of us get on planes more often than we want to because we have to travel a lot.
Probably all of us.
But I don't get on a plane and go, oh, I wonder if this is the time. I assume I'm going to get delivered to where I'm trying to go on time without any problems. And it's that same thing we've been talking about. If the bad gets blown up and blown out of proportion, and we've got to find a way to tell our story, all of us, the entire industry, tell our story to say, that's not our goal. Our goal is to deliver our freight, get our people back home safe, and not impact anyone that was sharing the roads with us. That's our goal.
Yeah. Don't be afraid too, right? Like, we are essential. We're here to do our job. We're going to do it safely. It's okay to drive around us. Like, we'll make it. We're the professionals, remember, not you.
I think we go back a couple of segues. We were talking about building up our drivers, and maybe I've never thought about this until listening to you a minute ago, Joshua. If we're building up our drivers, and I know internally we're, JB Hunt, you talked about sending them, flowers, right? That's what you're doing. Hey, great job. But when we do see those videos of a driver doing something good, or there is a celebration, if the trucking companies would turn that around and share it back with their drivers, make it shareable and allow them then to reshare it, that may be a way to start getting some momentum on building up our driver population and letting them walk around hopefully with their chest puffed out a little bit. Too many people telling them too many bad things, and by encouraging them, I think we help them.
Well, I don't know how many people in the public follow JB Hunt on Instagram, but I will tell you, you want to put a smile on your face, go and check out these drivers that are going through their 1 million mile banner, their 2 million mile banner, getting a cake, getting celebrated for driving safely day after day after day. I mean, it takes an average of 10 years to drive 1 million miles collision free. And I've got drivers who have done it 5 times over. 5 million miles accident free. That needs celebrated. And people need to hear, well, that's better than me. And I'm driving a Prius. You know what I mean? So
I think the other thing that you touched on, which some carriers do, but is the engagement with the families, because I think part of those families, the children, right? They help become the ambassadors for our industry, right? Because they're proud of their mother or their father who's a driver. They can tell that to their friends. So they help propagate that good story message, without us even knowing, because they know what their parents do and they're proud of it, right? And I think that helps to move that narrative forward too, right? Because we can't get to everybody, but if we can get to those families and they understand how important it is, they can help share that message.
Well, and we, annually celebrate our multi-million mile drivers. So if you achieve 2, 3, 4, 5 that year, we're going to bring you to corporate and we're going to make a big deal out of it. And we bring in family and we bring in friends because we recognize drivers can't do it on their own. Somebody's got to be back at home taking care of other things. Mrs. Hunt was one of those people for Mr. Hunt. When he was out on the road, she was at home taking care of stuff. And so we are just built for 60 plus years to understand how important family and friend support is to our drivers. And so literally, John, we will send flowers to somebody's house. Sometimes the driver can't be home to celebrate an anniversary, so we can help them do that. Does it happen all the time? No, that's not what I'm saying. But certain locations will do things like that because we do recognize you got to have those folks. We literally talk about fatigue and countermeasures of fatigue are getting good sleep. And we have talking points for our drivers to tell their spouses and their children, hey, when I go to bed and I pull those blackout curtains, you can't knock on the door. I've got to be rested and ready to go to work in the morning or in the evening or at night, whatever the case may be. Because if you don't have them on your side, it's really hard to succeed.
Well, I want to be respectful of time, and I know we're coming around the bend here. I'm interested in throwing a complete curveball, and maybe this lands flat and maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but have you guys watched any of those? So talked about social media. There's all kind of influencers now who are also truck drivers, right? And they're giving you tips. Like I like the auto hauler guys for some reason because I'm so fascinated about how we get all those vehicles in there. Or other folks that'll talk about, okay, here's what I do at the truck stop at night. Here's how I cook my food. Here's how I do this. Do we think we're going to win on this message? Or, I mean, usually we'd like to control something like that, and you can't really, you don't know what's gonna be said out there. But do you think the strength of the industry will stand on its own if these are our new ambassadors? Because Joshua, you're very respected in the industry, and lots of people know who you are. You're likely to be far less popular than the most popular truck driver with a cell phone camera in their truck, right? So we're going to have to stand on their shoulders in the long run anyway, right? So what are our thoughts on that aspect of things?
Hey, I think if it's done the right way, it can do nothing but help. If you're showing a positive spin on a tough job, more power to you. I'm not a big social media guy, but what I tend to see is negative. So anything positive that is showing you the other side of it, I'm a big supporter of. I thought you were going a different direction, and there's a certain individual that I've seen a few of his videos, may or may not have mentioned us, may or not have been correct in his assumptions. But those things hurt because that spreads that negative. And frankly, if the message isn't true, it's not going to help anybody. So if you've got somebody that's out there showing you the way to be successful and make this fun, I'm all for it.
Well, Sean, I think you're onto something there, because if I just look at my own kids, right, and yours too, they're avid social media fanatics, and I think when my kids see something that they haven't seen before that's interesting to them, what do they want to do? They want to research it more, right? They want to find out more about this. They're going to ask me questions about it. They're going to, and I think that will help them. That will help, I think, defray some of all the negative media that's out there, right? And they're going to take the time to dig into things and find out more. I think, to your point, Joshua, I think on balance, it's probably a good thing, because it'll get more awareness by the general public about our industry, and maybe generate more people wanting to join.
For sure.
Yeah. I think you can find the good and the bad, just depends on what you're looking for. But if there's a way collectively to promote the ones that are doing good, then I mean that's a great way to get a message out. And social media is definitely a strong power in this world today.
That's our call. That's our call in this podcast to the industry. Hey, if you know an influencer who's driving a truck, if you see them, like and subscribe.
There you go.
Let's blow them up a little bit. I was watching one just the other day. It sort of feeds nicely into this point, Joshua. She was like, hey, y'all, it's been a while since I made a video. I've been getting all these comments, people worried about where I've been. And you know what she was like? She was like, look, my life circumstances have changed. And now I'm home. And so the videos are going to be different. But man, like and subscribe, huh? Let's do it the grassroots way. We've been working grass tops. It's time to get down to fertilize the ground a little bit. Let that grass grow, or some other kind of metaphor that I'm sure I'll screw up. But cool. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I just want to say a big thank you to you, Joshua, JB, to you as well. Steve, no thanks to you, buddy. I do all the heavy lifting around here. Just kidding. No, but seriously, thanks everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of True North Truck Thought. If you enjoyed the topic today and want to tune in for future conversations here on the Triple T Pod, make sure to follow us. Also, please don't hesitate to let us know which topics you want us to cover in future episodes. Drop us a line in the comments section or send us an email to transportationnews@TrueNorthCompanies.com. Thanks and have a safe day.